and welcome to another build from Scale Model Geek. And this week, with the new release of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series coming out, you guessed it, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Absolutely superb sculpt. The detail in this is just wonderful. And for a change, I actually didn't have any failures. Everything came out spot on first go, which was a nice change. Now, I'm old enough to say that I actually saw Star Wars in the cinema back in 1977. It's going back a couple million years. The detail throughout this kit is just wonderful. That's some type of transmitter. I have no idea what this thing is, but it looks fantastic. And look at that little lightsaber there. Every little bit of the detail really printed up really nicely. And in this particular build, we have a special guest. I'll be building Obi-Wan Kenobi with this Eopie. But I will need to do some modifications to it because I want him to be kind of eating some grass rather than just stand there doing nothing. And we will fix him later. Let's get on with the build. Two halves of the Eopie, bit of a gap there, but not a big issue at all. To fix up this gap, I'm using this two-part epoxy ribbon. It's just a matter of cutting off enough ribbon there as one needs. Kneading it together, and I'm just rolling into a sausage there and just pushing it into the actual gap. And using a sculpting tool, just removing the excess there, as you can see. And time to glue his feet on. Don't ask me why I'm using all my force to push it on, but I did, and it stayed. Now in this section here, I'm just going to super glue his neck to the body. This is just a temporary fix until I use some epoxy 5-minute Araldite. And that'll give it a lot more strength to it. Once I've super glued his two halves of his cloak, I'm just using some resin here to fill in the crack there, or rather the joint. Just brushing it straight in and using a UV torch to solidify it. And the great thing about this technique, it actually conforms to the curves of his cloak. And so much easier. I didn't end up having to sand the actual joint there at all, which was really good. Saved me a lot of time. And of course the Eopie's legs gets the same treatment. Now for the Eopie, I'd seen a couple of videos where they used aluminium foil when they build their little figures, and they used them in the armatures. So I thought that was a great idea, and I'll use aluminium for his neck and just fill it in. Rather than using a whole bunch of putty, this foil turned out to be fantastic. Great fill, great solid fill, and easy to shape. And then topped it up with the two-part epoxy ribbon. And of course I had to put some at the bottom of his neck, otherwise it will look very, very strange. And adding some detail to match the neck. It's green, but it'll be nice once it's painted. And this time he won't fall apart. Just using the skin tone to give a base coat to all the bits and pieces of the kit. Now I'll let you in on a secret. I had no reason to paint it this colour. I have no idea why I painted it, but I did, and I'm stuck with it. So in the meantime, we'll just sit back and watch the beautiful grey paint disappear to a skin tone. Saddle brown for his cloak. I always start the painting with a smaller brush. I do a bit of an outline and then go to a bigger brush and fill it in. When I said big, I meant big. And his sleeves. And deckhand, I'm going to use that for this armour. I'm assuming it's armour, I'm not 100% sure what it is. But if you know what they are, please leave a comment and fill me in. I don't even know what this thing is. I'm assuming it's some type of transmitter. Again, let me know. That's Obi-Wan Kenobi's backpack. I'm using this beastie brown for all the blankets. Now I tend to use colours that I already have rather than having to go out and purchase more colours all the time. Now this is the airbrush version of the paint, so it goes on a bit thin, so you do need to give it a couple of coats. And right here I've realised, when I started dry brushing him, his arms are actually not part of the cloak, they're actually part of his tunic. So that was a bit of a mistake that I have to fix. And starting to paint his tunic. Quick dry brush with the ivory. This really brings out the detail nicely. I was really liking the look of this. And here's the correction. Just gave myself an extra 15 minutes of work. Some ivory to actually paint up his legs, or rather dry brush his legs. I'm using a combination of the medium olive and the black for his boots, the actual straps of his boots. Even though they look black in the video, they're actually a really deep green. Brown for the actual, or saddle brown for the actual leather areas. I added a bit of white to the green mix, the olive mix, so I can use it for the dry brush. And also for the boots. Now this steel I used for his buckles. And also his belt buckle. Now the two halves have been super glued together. And I'm just dry brushing one of the saddlebags from the Eopie. He's got 2 of them, so I needed to brush 2 of them, plus his backpack. Like I said, I had to go through a second coat of this. It was way too light and it was showing through too much, so I used the dark sand here from Ammo. The brown sand for the cords, the actual ropes that are holding his backpack together. And I had a bit of an accident with that super glue. I didn't put on the top too well, so it kind of dried out, so I had to kind of cut a hole in the side and dip into it. Lucky I buy the really cheap stuff. And slowly putting his backpack together. And that armor thingy-majiggy thing. Now I love this accent colour. I'm just using that to highlight some of the detail in the actual armour. And the dark grey version to go onto that transmitter thingy. Everything's a thingy today. It's come together very nicely. Now for the Tusken Raiders rifle. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, just painting the woodstock area. Then a bit of this brown sand for the dry brush. The brown sand for the dry brush of the wood areas. And some of this Tamiya gunmetal for all the metal bits, the scope, the barrel, the trigger area. Boy, this was fiddly. And then the ammo, a light metal to dry brush it all. Make it really pop. It's fiddly, but it's definitely worth the effort. And the BC brown for that strap. And once that's all dry, some dark sand to actually dry brush it all. I thought I'd use some of this brown accent into the shadow areas, the recess areas, and actually I'm glad I made that choice. It came up really well. There it is. Looks good. And the good old super glue finalises the backpack on his back. That's why it's called a backpack. Now I'm using this brown sand and I'm going to water it down really heavily as a wash to go over the Eopie. I really want this to be quite uneven. Just to add a bit of interest to the overall look of it. And the black red, I'm going to use that as a splatter. As you can see, just a toothbrush and lightly going over it so it splatters unevenly over the Eopie. And to add more interest, I use that skin tone as well, a watered down version of it. A quick dry brush of this dark sand overall. And also the light sand. Now for the eyes, I'm using this off-white, and then once I've painted in his eyes, I then shape it with the light sand and also a bit of the brown wash or the panel line. That stuff I use on the knees as well as the eyes, as I just mentioned. Dark flesh tone for his toes. And I end up dry brushing that with a lighter shade of that same paint. Now this was really fiddly, and I did have to go over it a couple of times because I used the airbrush version, so like I said earlier, it's a bit thinner. But it came up great. Now one thing I realised here is I need to replace a strap that I actually sanded off to hold that gizmo thing that's on his neck. And I'm just using some of this foil that comes off the top of a butter container and just cut it down to the size I need. Give it a quick coat of brown, some super glue, and then wrap right it around the neck. Now for his reins, I'm just using 3 pieces of this length because it's not the butter top isn't long enough, so I had to cut up 3 pieces, then glue it together, then give it a coat of this brown, dried it off, we're just dry brushing, adding a bit more detail to those straps. Some highlight to his backside. Now in retrospect, I probably should have cut off some of those tassels and re-glued them on a slight angle just to show that the wind was blowing it, but I didn't think of it till after I'd painted it all. It's just highlighting the edges with that dark flesh tone and also the tassels. This dark sand dry brushing is coming in very handy. Using this panel line accent is so easy. It's just a matter of just touching one edge and it runs down the corner. Gives it a really nice highlight. Onto the saddle. Now I found it a bit hard finding some correct references to the colours, so I'm kind of have some rough idea of what I'm doing. They're not 100% accurate, but they're good enough. It looks great. The whole colour scheme, I'm trying to keep it to a fairly like neutral earthy colours. So as you probably notice, I'm constantly using the same colours over and over again. So the whole diorama has a colour palette to it. Please support the channel, give us a like and subscribe. Just smash that button. This bit was super fiddly. Surprisingly, when I put on this little dot of super glue, I actually didn't super glue my fingers together. And that's got to be a first. Onto Ben Kenobi's face, and I'm using this brown sand as the base coat for his skin tone. For his eyes, this off-white. Now just like the Eopie, we're just painting the eyes and then his pupils with the black strip, and then shape them with the brown sand. Now I'm using a mixture of these two colours plus the glaze medium, and I've never used this medium stuff before, so apparently what it does is actually slow down the drying time of the paint as well as make it a lot more translucent, making the blending of the different colours a lot easier. So I'm excited to actually give this a bit of a go, and I've just done underneath his eyebrows, his lips, underneath his nose and the hollows of his cheeks. And I'm really happy with the way this stuff works. Now a lighter shade of it for the top areas of his cheeks, top of his nose and his forehead, and then I blend it in. Considering this is the first time I've ever done it, I'm really happy with the results with this, so I'll be practicing this technique a lot more. Starting off with a base coat of black for his hair and beard. I'll be dry brushing his hair with this Tamiya NATO brown. Obi-Wan Kenobi actually has some grey hair, so instead of using grey, I'm kind of using this light sand, I think it was, and to represent the grey areas. And it looks so much better. I'm glad I didn't use a grey. It looks a bit more natural using that light sand. Now I made a bit of a mistake here. I should have actually painted silver within his goggles first before I did the clear red, because the clear red's a bit dark. This was painted black, then gunmetal, dry brush of gunmetal, and then the gold for the tips. I couldn't find any reference to this staff, so I kind of made it a type of woody grained type staff. with a light leather strap there. Now, to make it feel like a bit more science fiction-y, I painted the edges, the ends black, and then dry brushed them with a gunmetal. Gluing his noggin on. That was a bit fiddly. Didn't want to go in that easily. Gotta say, I'm really happy with the way Obi-Wan Kenobi is coming out. Onto the final bits and pieces. This is the base. It's the same base that I used for my Ogre, my iPad Ogre diorama. And I just bought it from Bunnings. It was only $4. I've already given a coat of gloss paint. Now I'm just using these rubber little feet, just so it sits nice and evenly on tabletops and doesn't scratch or anything like that. Quick placement of where I'm going to have the figures, just to give me a rough idea. Now I've got some foam laying around in this hot wire cutter, and just shaping it, kind of getting it to the right height so Obi stands on there quite comfortably. And because it's a curved base, I just kind of butted it up to the edge, and using the curve of the base there, I just kind of ran the hot wire across and gave me a nice little curve there. Look at that, perfecto. Then just a matter of shaping again to, you know, kind of looks like a rock. And boy, don't ask me why I decided to use a hot stick gun on foam. It melted, but it kind of just had enough stick to it to stick it to the base. Luckily, when I put on all the actual details, it kind of just, you know, really reinforced the grip on there. I'm just using PVA glue, also known as white glue or craft glue, just covering the whole base, giving it a nice even coat of it, then sprinkling on some of this railway ballast. You know, you get from a hobby shop. I've got a whole container of it. And doing sections at a time, just making sure the glue doesn't dry up too much. You can see I've got a nice even coat of it. Now, to give it a nice solid finish to it, I'm using a really watered down version of this PVA glue. But before I actually did this section, off camera I used isopropylene alcohol and gave it a bit of a quick spray of that. And that just lets the thin down white glue actually go through all the ballast a lot easier. Otherwise it kind of just puddles. And there's nothing more fiddly than trying to get a straight piece of tape onto a curved edge. This was a bit frustrating, a bit time consuming, but worth it. US Earth Yellow for the base. Nice even coat of this Earth Yellow. Now the whole thing needs to be dry brushed because it looks very, very flat. So I'm using the Ammo Light Sand here. And this straight away brings out the amazing detail that's in the base. Time to glue young Obi-Wan Kenobi. Well, actually he's not that young at this stage. and just a 5-minute epoxy arrow diet. Yes, I held it there for 5 minutes. And some railway foliage. And I'm just using again the white glue. And there it is, look at that. Very happy with the way this turned out. So I'm kind of thinking it's time for the hero shots.